Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is the first episode of the Playbook. I don't know about you, but I'm pumped about this, Austin. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun because, like, I mean, we do a lot of breakdowns as it is, right? When we're
Yeah.
watching the CDL matches, so it feels like now we're just doing it in front of an audience, which obviously is going to make things like a little bit
Gosh.
more intense now. And yeah, we can't maybe go into some of the things that we typically do, but I feel like this is a good chance to kind of get into some analysis and break down some like big moments here, as we're obviously both pretty passionate about that.
Yeah, we're very passionate about that. Let's be honest. We're
Yeah,
not just kind
that's
of,
fair.
we're very passionate. Yeah, no, it's just one of those things for all you guys that are kind of wondering how this is going to look. We have been kind of going back and forth of, do we want to use this as a way to break down some of the plays that we saw from the day before, or do you want to use it as a way to kind of set up for the day upcoming? At
Mhm.
least for this opening one, you guys seemed pretty resilient on the fact that you guys wanted us to do it as a way to set up the day. So we found a couple of games here that I think were worth going over. They're all from recent weeks too, which is cool. We've got OpTic Gaming LA playing up against the Seattle Surge. This is from CDL Toronto, which was just the last week, and we've got a couple of good respawns to go over. But as we go through the rest of this the show, as we kind of break down over the next hour or so, the one thing we can really say is if you guys feel like as you're watching this is really cool content, like get out there on social and like help promote the stream. Like the biggest I think setback that we have when it comes to creating content between like myself individually or Visions individually or especially us as a group is that we don't really get a lot of traction, at least early. So anything you guys see that you feel is valuable, any little shout out definitely helps. So let's dig into this first game here, shall we? We've got OpTic Gaming playing up against Seattle Surge, like I had mentioned. And this is actually a Gunrunner hardpoint that was tragically close, I would say, as we went forward. And this was actually a pretty pivotal matchup as well. This is a knockout game. So for OpTic, this kind of setting up the whole thing, they needed to get into playoffs essentially to try to keep their hopes of securing a top 8 placement going through, and obviously it kind of eluded them, but this was a really solid game, and we'll
In
see pretty quickly
comparison,
kind of what happened
but
here. But let me
it's going to be fun.
turn this
It's going to be
down,
a blast.
the caster POV. There we go.
Seattle 2
Yeah,
and
it's also
6 in
like
terms of
where we
record
have like
throughout
Hollow
the
and Draws
season.
it too, and they had first kind of been really new to the roster here. So like
Yeah.
this is also kind of a good look to see like how they came in just as like mechanical players, as there wasn't a whole lot of chemistry built in between the team itself. But you do see like a lot of those things kind of play out for us as well through some of these big rotations that we're going to have here leading towards some of the money hills, which is obviously the big factor. And you can see like TJ is already starting to prep some of those initial pinches and those pinches that we see here from time to time. That's something that I think we should really obviously highlight as we go throughout this entire video, Alan, because we obviously picked apart a couple that made the difference and also like really hurt the team that made the pinch.
Yeah, 100% the case. And I'm glad that you brought up the point about the whole chemistry thing, because we heard pretty specifically from Draza and Hollow that, yeah, they've had a lot of time to play together. And the three core of TJ, Quavo, and Slasher, they're all very familiar with each other as well. And the chemistry really kind of balanced itself out just almost instantly. A lot of the same play style choices were being made. So, yeah, pretty typical scrappy opening for P1 overall. Seattle never gives away control, which is exactly what you want to see. And then things start to get a little bit interesting coming up here in a moment, because OpTic are going to get one last final spawn. And they're actually going to be spawning up near the top side of Cole. And with that, and the hard point kind of coming to a close, they're obviously going to take this natural rotation, just move through the top side and try to hit from the back end. And this is going to work out pretty okay, because if you take a look as far as where is Seattle positioned, they are mostly focused on what's coming down at the bottom. The big problem here was the fact that Slack never actually saw how many players are rotating around the back side of him. So he's actually missing out on information. It's going to lead to a pretty interesting rotation coming up here, Austin.
It does. And I mean, you have just about everyone in the positions that you want them to, right? Like you have everyone on the raffling. You have one player here, Pander, that's currently up top AC, trying to also battle these OpTic players, which is really what stops them from being able to push right away, right? And how they have to force some of these gun battles at the window. And you kind of see that take place right there as 2 kills end up going through here for us. But OpTic has already been pretty much, neglected with their push here coming in towards the side on the water tower because of all these power positions that are playing a factor, like Octane's up top, shutting them down as they're running through. So it's really hard to like hit this hill just from one angle. And that's why you have to create the pinch. And you see OpTic slowly start to adjust because of that as well.
Yeah, this is the big play to kind of watch out for coming through with Hollow. He's going to try to hit this from the bottom side, but the spawns are actually going to be right around here for OpTic. So the whole idea is that you want to essentially try to pinch this in multiple ways. If you can find a way to get someone around the back, great. But like you mentioned, I think the big position that kind of spoils this upcoming is the fact that Octane is in a good spot to eventually read this. And I would say, even though it is a late read from Seattle as whole, they don't really have anybody forward into a position to kind of watch over cargo, so they're all kind of watching from inside the hill in multiple directions. They do a really good job of kind of realizing their mistakes, and they essentially turn things around. So they do give up a lot of ground, but they do a really nice job here to try to recorrect some of those mistakes through. So Octane up top, he's going to pop off. There's a second big kill. Now you've got OpTic, who are actually spawning back near the bottom because Apathy spawned up top. And Octane just essentially becomes a turret, as he typically does. And we kind of joked about having like an Octane counter. How many times we talk about Octane saving the day for Seattle? But this is absolutely one of those moments without question.
Yeah, I mean, like how many? I mean, you could obviously look back on so many moments that Octane has obviously been pivotal, but I feel like one to look out for is the man actually on your screen as well. Apathy does quite a few big things this game as well, and you start to see this rotation play through for us, and we kind of started to look at this one as well for as far as, all right, they have locked down the majority of P2, and they have themselves in a spot where they can take the long way around over towards the P3 hill, and something that we see from time to time when rotating from P2 to P3 is when you start to move through like this forest area, there's a spawn that exists basically on the other side of Coal, which would be where you would typically be flooding in and make the call to say, let's just hit the hill, get a smoke down, and try to brute force our way through. But this is like that interesting spot where they try to flood in towards the back. So OpTic are forced to kind of put some of their resources in towards the middle of the map, as well as covering this forest area. So there's a lot of mid-map control that starts to play a factor here for them. And Seattle already have a good amount of numbers together, as they're pretty far pushed up, like already like 10 seconds left in the old hill here. So it puts them in a pretty advantageous spot to be able to start to make this rotation towards our third hill.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, again, because this hit for OpTic was continually coming from the top side and really, I guess, from the middle, but it kept coming through this direction, that Seattle never had the ability to regain these water tower spawns fully. I mean, you had a couple of spawns that were there, but this is kind of what we talk about when we talk about rotation spawns versus hill spawns, right? That's kind of like the terminology that you and I like to use a lot. And the rotation spawn is absolutely, you want to be spawning at least somewhere in this direction near the top right-hand side, because it gives you the ability to, if you're winning gunfights, pending that OpTic is hitting from the bottom, you've got a pretty free rotation just to back straight up and go to P3. That's obviously not available to them. So yeah, the only play available if they want to try to influence P3 early is actually to play for the upcoming hill spawns, which will be on the back side of boxes. So it's a tough decision because you're taking the extra long route. But the good news is, like you mentioned, they're finding kills. We still have 10 seconds worth of hardpoint time left, and they're already contesting space in the middle of the map. So it's really just comes down to what happens in these next 50-50s. If you win the gunfights coming up on these two members, there's really two options that you have. For Seattle, either number one, you find the kill bottom side of woods, you push behind that kill. Number two, if you don't find the way to get through that way, but you find the kill mid-map, then you can actually cut the middle of Boiler and actually set up a pinch through jump wall and try to hit this a little bit closer, a little bit more incognito. So it's an interesting attempt. Maybe not the ideal one, but they're making a bad situation, or I guess not an ideal situation, into a pretty great one for them. And while they find the kill, not mid-map, but they do take down Hollow on the end. So this is going to open up that whole play that we're talking about, trying to get them around the backside to get to behind the boxes.
Yeah, and you can now see the spawns that end up coming through. OpTic ends up spawning in that P3 spot that I talked about, what likely would have happened to Seattle if they went down. But because Pander's able to trade out that gunfight on the Hollow, he just ends up pushing through. And now Seattle have the favorite side of the spawn heading in towards some of these future money hills, right? Because when we think about the most important hills on this map, it's always about P2 and P5. So in order to control P5, you want to make sure you have some of those spawns a lot earlier on, typically around this B3 hill. Yeah. And then this is the interesting spot where, okay, now Seattle are caught in a spot where, yeah, they can hit the hill, but there's still 40 seconds left here for us. And they don't exactly have all their numbers together because a couple players did end up going down. Proto does end up opening up things with a pretty big two-piece here that does give them a little bit of breathing room. And then they have the pinch that's coming through here from Slack. So a lot of this is basically based on how these 50-50 gunfights end up going, because if you were to full wipe Seattle in this case right here, like this is a chance for OpTic to then say, all right, let's just try to push through and fight for the back here and get ourselves in towards that back positioning. And obviously it makes it a lot more difficult to be able to push out and get yourself in a spot where you're going to be able to contest the hill going forward. So this is one of those spots where Seattle like want to be able to convert here and not give OpTic the control of the lead.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a risky play in the first place to try to move all the way through boxes. Like you mentioned, if this comes up empty, you've not only given up 20 seconds with a hard time, you're probably giving up the next at least 15, right? Because you're spawning so far away from actually being able to set up a hit. But that's a big break from Seattle. So the long OE does pay off, and like we mentioned, now OpTic only has one choice, and that's essentially Flood. The big question is, when do you start to look towards the rotation for the fourth hard point? Because you're in a weird spot right now if you're OpTic, to where you want to still funnel, and you would love to control the scrap time, especially when you've got number 4 and Hollow is in a position right here, because essentially what that's going to allow you to do with you spawning on the backside over here is you could set up, I'm going to hold this side, we're going to control old, we'll set up that, everyone else off the respawn can just funnel behind this, no problem. That's a free hit to initial. The problem is they're putting so much investment into this hill. What I think you're eventually going to see is Hollow will actually get taken out of this position, and he's going to try to hit this for really late time. And it allows a big opportunity for Seattle to essentially make a play over towards P4. So this whole hill and what's about to happen is going to result in what comes through in these final 15 seconds worth of scrap time. So here's that hit from OpTic. There's only 10 seconds left, and they're still sending numbers because they want this position P3. That's the weird thing. With 10 seconds left and you losing Hollow on this position, you really need to be cutting the middle of the map and sending someone around to grab initial. This is a free 15 seconds without question. Yeah, you would love to have this to turn it into maybe a free 20, 25, but this is absolutely still a free 15 seconds regardless of what happens on the scrap time.
Yeah, it's a free 15 seconds. And I mean, it's also like an interesting spot because like you almost always, as the team that's looking to control like the P5 money hill, when you have this back warehouse spawn, it's, you almost feel the need to be able to push things out here and break the hill so that you don't have any end up having, you know, these players that are slipping through and towards the back and flipping things out potentially, which is, you know, something that OpTic has been trying to do here on a couple of these hills. So they want to send their numbers here, but yeah, you said like it already hurts them, right? Because you know, they're not exactly getting themselves set up for the next rotation. Neither team is really in a position where they're going to be set up for this next rotation. So this is just pretty much just a battle for the back right here. Like if OpTic gets a full wipe, then there's a chance that they can push through, but they still have one player that's probably going to push, which is Draza. He might just make this rotation right towards crates. So Seattle, I believe, make the call to try and hit this out and trade out the gunfights, which I think ultimately is probably the safer call in the situation, instead of making the numbers to go and rotate, just simply because you have to favor the spawns heading into the P5 hill.
Yeah, and for Seattle, like we mentioned, you cannot allow anyone to exist on scrap time because that's a free line of sight to cover everything coming across the middle of the map as you're trying to hit to P4. But the problem is now that the Hollow is down, this is actually a free rotation for Seattle to try to get here for some opening time. So the overcommitment is a bit strange. So there's the last hit, and this is the one we kind of watched this one beforehand, but this is the weird call. There's 2 seconds worth of hill time left, and Hollow just spawned up P3 or outside of P2, and he's making the hit to come help P3. This feels like the overinvestment right here, and this is one of those things that you could expect to see mistakes like this, I think, because these guys are still a bit new when it comes to playing at this level and playing with their teammates. But this is one where I think that if you're Hollow, okay, we lost P3 scrap time. What can you potentially do still spawning up because this hill is active to hit? And I think personally you have to hit through Boiler. Try to take this away so you're contesting the middle of the map more, and then it gives him a free line of sight towards outer. That's my whole idea.
I mean, he's also the AR too. So if you get somewhere like you where you're able to, you know, position and watch that cross from forest into the crates, as long as they don't have a smoke down, like even if you fall, like you're still giving really good information towards your squad that's, you know, hopefully going to be set up in the spot. I think it's just one of those situations where OpTic isn't set up really. They're just getting towards the hill, and Seattle has not made the rotation. So it's it just feels like everyone almost Hail Married for P3. And yeah, I think like you said, like overcommitted for sure.
Go watch. It's Octane, dude. Like he's about to do something stupid. You can just kind of feel it. I mean, he's in such a great position. So yeah, now OpTic's starting to realize that, okay, we have to give this up, and they're going to full rotate around the backside. And what we're looking for now out of this side of Seattle is, okay, here's what has to happen, right? You've got big numbers coming up Green Alley. You've got Octane who's watching outer. Essentially, what we're hoping for is you send a couple players on the inside to help in, to get in, and then you're trying to push through and take control of bathroom, right? Like, this whole control is everything for P4 because it allows you essentially an idea to I can pitch behind if I feel like I have to, or at least at the worst case scenario, I have an ability to help pick up the pinch from a pretty safe location, and you're taking away this space. So even if you're not pinching from it, you're denying OpTic the ability to pinch from it. The problem is you still have a potential 1v1 right here in the middle of the boiler room, which could potentially throw things awry, trying to get into this opening time of P4. But like we mentioned, this is already 10 seconds of hill time, and there's nobody on the hill. And OpTic, I feel like, would have really liked that 10 seconds for sure.
Yeah, Draza pushed things out. Like, he died and Octane got a free kill. So, like, you would typically want to push things up. You don't have any of your teammates with you. So, yeah, so you missed 15 seconds here for free, essentially. But I think this is where the interesting moment happens here for us, obviously, right, Alan? Like TJ doesn't get into the engagement in Cole, and he's able to now push himself through in towards basically the back P5 warehouse for himself here. And then you get the immediate flip that comes through for Slack. So, Slack ends up spawning way behind P2, which is one of the further spawns because Hollow still exists right behind the crates. And yeah, this is a spot where TJ is able to get his way in towards the back, and then you have the pinch that comes through for Apathy. That's where I think things really go awry, and why things actually did really flip out here. And Slack ended up spawning behind P2s because Apathy hit a little bit of a deep pinch through the tracks and kind of hit this back safety net angle that, you know, is talked about quite frequently, and Parasite was kind of talking about it yesterday, where you usually would see that push come through the bathrooms, or you would see that push come through over the half wall to be able to get yourself behind the hill, but no one really has full control of it. So it's another one of those moments where things are up in the air. There's a lot of people dead, and that's when obviously spawn flips can come in, and this is where exactly it happens here, as CJ makes a really nice route.
These kills right here is exactly why. You get 4 members down. All of that happens in the very front side of the hill. And yeah, like Apathy, he actually rotates, I think, beyond. He actually doesn't push through Cole. I want to see he actually takes the long route around. I don't really remember how to see it, but he misses TJ completely. Yeah. And there have been moments, and there will be moments, where you'll see a lot of teams who try to make this play that you could have a guy existing back here. You know, if this is TJ and he's just existing inside of P5, sometimes that doesn't exactly flip things out if you still have numbers holding from the front here, because the game is still recognizing that, okay, the majority of Seattle is here, the majority of OpTic is here, so even if there's somebody in the back, that's not going to be enough to fully flip the hill out. So that's the only thing, is because Apathy hits this long pinch around instead of cutting through like water ramp or trying to hit through bathroom, because he goes all the way around the back and all of his teammates die in the front. Now the game is sitting here realizing, okay, since Apathy's the last player left alive, Seattle wants to be on this side. And because OpTic win these gunfights on the other side of the 50-yard line over here, and you have TJ, the game is saying, okay, OpTic's here now, is essentially how I'm kind of reading that.
Yeah,
that's a big swing moment. Big swing moment.
It's massive. It's absolutely massive for OpTic. And I mean, now they're like, all right, we have the safe spawns, and we can start to get ourselves control. And then the exact same thing essentially happens, but TJ gets there to stop Proto from being able to do the what could be potentially the same thing, right? Everyone from OpTic is pushed up in towards the hill. No one's necessarily pinching it, but I mean, you have Quavo, who's pretty far pushed up here past the crates, just trying to find himself kills. But while that happens, you know, you can see Dross is anchoring right now. Like, he's watching the push through, making sure that, all right, if you're going to play that far ahead, then I'm going to make sure I play this far back so that we don't have any kind of the same spawn flip that comes through here again. So it's a good heads up play from him, making sure no one slips through. And yeah, of course, it's going to be slight control for Seattle, but OpTic have control of P5.
This is a risky moment that I'm glad we got the big blow up here, because obviously Seattle, they've got the ability to hit through scrap, but they're still spawning up this way, right? That's so you essentially have the ability to do a couple of different things right here. And this, I think, just comes down to reading the kill feed as it starts to pop up, because you're going to essentially see at this point, every part of the map is going to get pushed up for Seattle. They're going to try to take away everything. And this could be really rewarding or extremely risky. If you don't win these gunfights coming up, when P5 turns active, there are no spawns for P5 back here. It's too close to the hill. And like you had mentioned, like on Haggie's stream, he was talking about the different spots that you could spawn. Typically, you're spawning in one of two positions. Either you're going to be spawning here, or you're going to be spawning here. Typically. If you're pushed up, you might spawn out here or out here. But typically, you're spawning somewhere in these areas.
For sure.
So if you're Seattle and you're taking control of both of these, and you somehow start to lose maybe a couple of numbers here, like you lose one on each side, all of a sudden, you're on an individual hit, and OpTic might spawn behind both of those. Like, this is a possible 50-50 spawn out moment if you don't win your gunfights, because OpTic can't spawn behind the hill. So they're not controlling where OpTic is going to spawn in favor of trying to hit from multiple angles. So it's rewarding in the instance that you're hitting from multiple angles. And if you win the kills, you're probably going to break the hill. But if you don't win these gunfights convincingly, all of a sudden you might get caught in no man's land. And now you've got players who are watching you from the front and spawning behind you right behind you for a pinch. This is a really dangerous play for Seattle coming forward.
Because they now have the spawns, and you kind of like a few of the players that
and this is an interesting spot from TJ too, number 2. The fact that he's playing so far forward, he's just playing for a cheeky play. So that leads to a lot of open space, but there's one of those spawn outs immediately. I mean, you can see like that's really damn close. Like this hit is right here, and this is an exact spawn right behind it. So this is an immediate reward. Like TJ dies, and he spawns up right behind. So he's still pinching, even though he doesn't win the gunfight.
Yeah, this is like the crazy thing about P5, right? It's like you can even spawn behind them the exact same thing, like you said, like I'm in the forest area. So yeah, it puts things in a weird spot, but Seattle do at least a decent job of getting close enough to the hill, and they do have a chance at being able to break this. Like it's very possible that they're able to do it, but obviously TJ is able to go big here. He ends up finding himself 3 kills. I'm pretty sure Quavo also able to put himself on a little bit of a spree here maybe as well, which allows him to be able to shut this push down. So you've already netted yourself, a massive 40 points. You got yourself basically right back in towards the game with the lead. And yeah, Seattle I think just took a little bit of a bad approach, I think, to how they wanted to basically break that, and it came down to where they flooded their members off the start of the rotation, as well as the people coming off of the previous hill, not maybe rotating through the middle or teaming up with Boiler trying to break over half wall or something like this, or through green. They went through the forest area and blocked both spawns at the same time.
Yeah, and I'll just go backwards so we can watch through that one more time, but like you'll see it happen on the north side here. This is right when TJ dies. So again, you're going to see Seattle hit from here, but TJ's going to spawn up right behind this hit when they're in boxes. And then interestingly enough, you're going to get a little bit of a choo-choo train coming forward, because as soon as Seattle dies, they actually spawn behind them. And then there's actually one more OpTic spawn that happens. So essentially you're going to see this push, this spawn, this spawn, and then immediately after that, I think there's actually one more spawn after that. So it's like a little bit of like this pinstripe conga line that's going to happen in the middle. And that all is because Seattle is deciding to hit from multiple angles. If they instead of hitting through woods, if they decide they want to actually go this direction, they're actually going to essentially force OpTic to spawn woods. You can actually read that spawn a little bit better. So that's again like one of those things that if you get the opening kills, you're hitting from multiple angles. That's great. You're rewarded for that. But if you don't win those opening kills, you're putting yourself in a really risky spot for a number of moments behind that. So there's TJ falling. Here comes his spawn up right outside P3. He's going to get this pinch set up. There's number 7. That's Apathy spawning all the way out. There's Slasher spawning right in the middle of it. So, and then there's number 5, Draza. So it's a conga line, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And it never really allows Seattle a chance to fully hit this, mostly because they lose that first hit. So tough scenes.
Yeah, and then they never really get a chance to where they can hit the hill again.
Because now you're at 25 seconds, and once you spawn up, you already see number 0's Proto. He's already trying to make the play to go around the backside to make sure they secure what will eventually be P2. Yeah, there's the spawn up top P3 again.
Yeah, that's the interesting spot about having money hills, but then this is like we find ourselves in a spot where it's almost like a bit of a race for who actually gets P2 spawns, right? Like both teams are obviously focused on the hill that's about to pop in the middle of the map, but also trying to get themselves in towards the back here, and Octane's able to deal with both. So and obviously secures it, right? Yeah, it's tough. It's tough there.
That's
but
9 million
you grab
there.
both kills for sure, 100%. And then there's a little like saving grace, like whenever you get these 3 or 4 downs, like you want to try to obviously push up the best you possibly can to have a chance of flipping things, but it's really hard to flip this spawn unless you're like coordinating multiple members to be able to do it, or if you maybe just get a super lucky sneak and then like a 5 down or something like that.
And the other thing too is like, for OpTic, you're in a position where you haven't found much success getting through the back, but you found enough kills here to where Seattle can't push up to contest P1, so you've actually soaked a pretty okay amount of time on P1, considering that you maybe see like 30 total seconds worth of time going one way or the other on this hill. It usually stays empty for the most part. That's not bad at all. So now we're looking at P2, and this is a copy paste. This is the exact same setup that OpTic had the last time. They spawned here right around the same time left on the hill. They're making the same rotation through the top, and they're making the same hit, essentially trying to pinch. But the thing that we saw last time around was that this pinch was thrown in way too soon. And this player dies before this hit fully comes through. And we also saw that this hit wasn't smoked. And that's all going to change coming up. That's going to be the good news, the good adaptation for OpTic here.
They still don't have the spawns for P2, and you're going to see that.
And then you see it, right? You have Hollow who's
There's
just
the smoke.
slowly waiting. Smoke comes through, and then it's panic mode for Seattle because they can't use the window as the power position that is mainly the cutoff point.
And that was what was there last time,
right?
Yeah,
exactly. That's where you saw Pandir, I think it was, who was in the window, was able to make some moves happen. Octane was top scaffolding. So I think that's the spot where it's like, okay, you have to realize you can't funnel through this door unless you absolutely have to, and it's for the game. And OpTic obviously make the correct adjustments. And so, like, we're not worried about flooding this from the side door anymore. We're simply worried about getting towards the back while also relying on Hollow to be able to make some moves, because even if Hollow doesn't find any value from this pinch in the very front, he at least turns the heads enough for OpTic to be able to make a play and maybe find some players in the back. And that's obviously best case scenario when trying to break this out. But this first push is actually extremely well coordinated here for OpTic.
and I think the other side of it too is when you're setting up this passively for Seattle, you're losing so much intel.
Definitely,
I mean, granted, they did have a player up front, and they still have Apathy who's here. So you're trying again. You see, Seattle's putting a lot of investment, thinking that OpTic's going to be down here. But the problem is, I think they're just assuming too much and not actually controlling where OpTic is spawning. Because I mean, look at how passive this setup is. I mean, that's a lot of space. And granted, you know, this is a common spot. You need to always have somebody with an AR up top watching up. But typically, there's always an SMG player somewhere in here to try to help this. And it at least allows enough time to read, okay, the full hit's coming from Water Tower. We might be able to set up an opportunity where we're actually pinching behind this and also watching the back. So we're forcing them to come into those two spots while trying to influence these spawns from behind them. And again, throwing them back this way, which is, I think, where typically you assume a team is going to be hitting from. So I think with the combination of the better execute from OpTic, where it comes to smoking out the front and then full wrapping around the back, but also the same point is that Seattle's given them the opportunity to hit that.
They are. Yeah. They are, and yeah, they just have a lack of information, and they see Kenny here, and Pander's like, all right, we see Kenny, but Hollow's out front, and it's like, whoa, are they hitting from the front right now? And yeah, it's a bit of chaos that ends up kind of taking place here for you. They do a good job of finding kills, but then Kenny just, man, like, look what he does here. Just finds like a 4-piece, like literally, like found every single player, and then you have the close spawn by Water Tower now for OpTic, so they now have the ability to be able to flood their resources in towards the hill, and you're forcing them to spawn crates where you almost just have to look one way essentially, except for the couple of roaming players that we do find ourselves that are in and around the hill. It's a pretty scrappy hill for the most part, like a lot of contesting here, but Kenny's play like definitely opens up the avenue for OpTic to be able to regain control of it.
Well, and beyond that, like if Kenny doesn't find these kills in the back, he finds what, 3, 4? He's on 5 right now.
Yeah.
So like if he doesn't find the ability to open up this space, like OpTic is still essentially single-handedly, that's a one-dimensional flood still. Like, off the respawn, you're probably still having to try to reinforce it. Because Kenny stays up, you don't have to make that rotation. You can just cut this way. You can start to make a look over this way as you're trying to rotate back over to P3 early. This is what we call that rotation spawn, right? You're in a position to where you can contest this hill late because we're only at 25 seconds. We're in that, like, back-end scrap 20 to try to figure out, okay, who's going to take these final 20 seconds. But we're mostly worried about the rotation. And OpTic has the ability to hit this a little bit safer. So they can actually keep sending numbers this way. And actually, because Kenny works his way so far forward, he actually not only forces Seattle to spawn to the bottom, he actually forces them to spawn, like, borderline outside a bathroom. Like, they have to come a real far way to re-hit this again. And with the time that's on the clock, you're in a tough spot. Because, like, if you're spawning here and committing to this hit, that means you're not going to win this. You're giving up the rotation for 3, essentially. So this is a really tough decision for Seattle. And they, like you mentioned, they do a good job to stay in and contest for a little while longer. And now that they spawn up bathrooms with 20 seconds left, they're essentially going to concede the scrap time. And they will take the initial rotation. So that's that tough decision making. And those are the moments that really can decide the game. Like, if Seattle decides, instead of spawning up here and rotating back to P3, if they decide to hit this again, even if they win out some of the gunfights, you're taking what, maybe 10 total seconds once you clear the hill?
Yeah.
And how much time are you giving up over here? Like, that's probably 15, 20 seconds you're giving up on the initial for P3.
It's just like a moment there where it's like, all right, we almost have to concede it and we have to play the rotation. It's just the problem is like Seattle is now starting to get figured out. I mean, that's what happens through a lot of hard points, right? Like once you get through the first rotation, it's like, okay, this is how they played it. Let's try this time. And you make those little adaptations as you're making those rotations and those calls. And now Apathy, this is where he starts to, I think, come online a little bit here, where he starts to get a lot more aggressive and is starting to feel himself a little bit more. And he's just trying to play this little cutoff angle here from the very middle of it. And because of this information now for Apathy, knowing that not everyone rotated from crates to move through forest, this should be pretty self-explanatory here for Seattle, that the majority of the members are moving through the coal area and are moving through the middle of the map here. And I mean, you start to see also Proto push this out as well, where he's going to uncover some information here very, very soon as well. So this is probably that good case scenario for Seattle right now. The problem is that they just lost that gunfight in the middle, and now Draza has that opening to be able to push things through, and they only really have Octane watching over. But I'm pretty sure a well-placed smoke ends up coming through right as you see this hit comes through, because Draza is able to make some magic happen on this B3 hill.
Yeah, this is another one of those situations that's you appreciate the zone and looking for exits for Seattle, but it's again a high reward, high risk situation where you have players that are so far forward that they can't help each other. These are individuals. I mean, there's no world that Apathy could turn around in time to help out Slack mid map.
Yeah,
there's no world where maybe Slack can hit and re-pinch this through Boiler, but these are all individual plays. These are 1v question mark plays, and if you lose members, your spawn is going to be back here, and there is no chance. Like, you're leaving these players on hill to fend for themselves. Like, this is a lot of trust that not only the individuals are going to stall, but that if they don't win their gunfights, the two that are left on hill can hold off against a full flood. Because like you mentioned, this kill mid-map means that Draza could essentially hit around the backside of the pinch while this flood comes through, and it's completely uncontested. There's not a world that Apathy gets there in time to help this. And here, Apathy's trying to track backwards, but like, look how far Draza is. He's already in the backside. He doesn't find the kill, but he opens up space for OpTic. That team kill, that is actually so big. So like, if that team kill doesn't come through, that's a 3v1 for the hill. Now, because the team kill is there, it's Apathy who's able to rotate in. I'm using the wrong color. Apathy rotates in, and now you've got help. This is going to be a 50-50 battle. This is big.
Seattle having enough forces to into this fight.
Yeah, it's like an awkward moment here for Apathy, right? Like, he's just like holding it out, and yeah, it buys enough time for his teammates to come off of the spawn, and OpTic are still still getting the spawn back behind the coal mine. So it just puts you in a spot where it's like, okay, do we keep funneling? Do we keep funneling? Do we keep funneling? And the answer right now for OpTic is yes, because they want to fight for the future spawns.
Yeah.
But there has to be a point in time where it's like, okay, we have to make the rotation, and this is where they struggled last time, right? Like, they almost made some of these same plays where they might have overcommitted for some of the scrap time, and because of that, they're not maybe in position in crates to be able to lock down initial time, but they at least recognize that, okay, we're not going to flood all our members through to the scrap time this time, and we're actually going to send some of our teammates over towards the crates so that we can actually get some time here, because this is the point in the game where it's right like 155 to 139. So if you're not in control of the P5 hill, then in your head you're probably thinking, okay, let's try to get at least a good amount of time off of crates so that we can have a chance at maybe trying to contest a bit of that P5's time, and the game's still going to be relatively close.
Yeah, I think there's another moment. I'm going to back up one just real fast like here. You're going to see it a couple of different times where this spawn for Draza continues to happen, and he continues to hit this pinch behind the hill. And there was a moment actually earlier on in the hill during this push. This is when that initial gunfight win that we were talking about comes through, and you still have members for Seattle pushed forward, where when we were watching this through the first time, we were like, okay, Draza, you have a decision to make here. Do you pinch behind this hill, or do you try to play and zone off the respawns, which will likely come through one more time for Seattle? And instead of playing for the full spawn, he actually hits behind this. And when we initially saw this, we were thinking, at least I was thinking, I don't know how much you were, but I'm thinking, Draza, you hit this way. You've got numbers behind this once you get this kill, and you just trust that your teammates are going to win this gunfight, and you stop the reinforcements from coming in. But I think because he decides to go around the back, and then that coupled with the fact that a team kill happens, you lose the pinch, you lose the numbers, the reinforcements get there in time, right? Like, that's the whole reason that happens. I think there was an opportunity there for Draza to really foil everything that Seattle wanted to do with this setup, but
there was, because he also gunned Octane too, right? Like Octane's on the heady, like he's on the wall heady, and you see
Right
the gunfight
there,
right
boom.
there, like right, like wall bangs him, takes Octane down. So now the AR player here, Octane, like can't really watch over and help Pander, you know, with the initial push here coming from the front. So yeah, there's a couple of different scenarios that probably could have played out, and Drawson maybe could have played a little bit more patient, could have regen and just held the cut and simply let his teammates follow up so that they could try to break the hill onto just the one player that was there, while also worrying about his back because he does not know where Draza is. So there's almost a little bit of probably maybe just a small misplay, I think, that ended up coming through, but it still ends up playing, I think, okay for OpTic, because they do fight for a bit of the scrap time, and
they get
they're
there,
able
right?
to keep Seattle off of it, so which is obviously the main goal of the entire play.
This is a good position right here for Kenny. He's in a spot where you've got good control of not just the bathroom, which we talked about the last time around, but you're actually pushing Kenny into a spot to where if he could exist for as long as possible, he doesn't even have to find kills from this position. You just essentially wait for Seattle to rotate around behind you, and he's also in a position that you can see it on his POV. He can also watch to see if anyone's holding this long angle back here. So there is actually an opportunity, if OpTic win these gunfights on initial, to where you're going to have the ability to send Hollow through and Kenny around the back. This is a very telegraphed play for a spawn flip coming through very early on. And it's all because of the positions they're holding. Like, you know, you're not going to get pitched from behind bathroom because you already have somebody there. You're already able to control the middle of the map because Kenny can see that. He literally can see this jump wall, and he can see if anyone's watching the OE. I mean, this is an incredible spot for OpTic to pull away with this game. And Kenny's going to go for a pinch up, and unfortunately, I just don't think you need a challenge there, flat out. Like, I think you just keep your life, just hold for a little while longer, wait for this hit to come through.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was maybe like, I think it might have been pressure like on Kenny, because like he just lost like all of his teammates essentially that were in the hill.
That's true.
So like it maybe felt like there was like a pressure point for him to make a play, and it's like, okay, maybe the majority of their members are pushed up past the middle of the map and they don't know I'm here. Simultaneously at the same time, like Hollow's also making this play like on screen as well while they're trying to push through P3. So like there's still a hard chance for a spawn flip, and I think Kenny just like realizes, okay, this is my chance to go. But if he waits maybe like, you know, it's easy for us to say, hey, if he waits like 3 seconds here, like it's perfect because Hollow's coming, he finds the kill.
All that, yeah, it's easy.
Exactly.
Stupid player. But no, it's just one of those things that I think that it just it comes down to the conversation point of like, what are we really fighting for here if you're OpTic? And these are these moments that, again, this is what, week 2 of these guys playing with each other. Like, literally, they played the weekend before, they play this weekend. So I think there's obviously a fault on the setup in whole. Like, the fact that you lose 2 for free here without getting a trade is a mistake in the first place, which does essentially mean that Kenny has to try to make a ambitious call. But there were more plays available. Either number one, he sits here and you essentially wait, and then you say, okay, I'm going to hold this position, wait for not just Hollow to make the play through, but also figure out where's my team spawning after those kills come out. Like, you're losing, what, 5-10 seconds? Okay. But I think the discipline of just waiting to see, like, oh, if they're still spawning back here, then I know I can make a play for a pinch with help from this direction, and my teammates can hit from here. Or if we're spawning here, then there's no need to make this play. You can actually cut this way and get there sooner.
Right to the hill. Yeah,
but it's just one of those things. I think you're right, though, because they lose 2 members here. It puts the pressure, and Kenny feels like he needs to make a play. And Pander actually finds 2 with the pistol on hill. That's actually not okay.
Not okay. That's right. This is the weird spot, though, right? Like, this is the spot that I thought was actually one of the most interesting kind of moments of this map, is where you have Hollow, who's currently sitting, you know, in this P3 heady, like right by the minecart, and he's watching the cross. And I think Slack's like really misplayed here, because like all of his teammates are now in a spot where like they're pushed up, they have hill control, they're winning out and trading into a lot of these gunfights, and obviously this is really crucial time, so they want to get it. But Slack like almost like gives like a free avenue for Hollow to just hit the back, because like nobody else is here, and Slack is calling for help, and you see Proto here with him to try and fight for the back. But it feels like this was a moment where Slack just had to rotate all the way through the P5 warehouse and try to match Hollow, or at least try to hold controlled like the boxes angle, right? Like this is like too big of a moment where whoever controls P5 might just have a chance at being able to win the game on P1 potentially. So this just feels like a moment where Slacked, I think, made the ambitious play to move forward and gave OpTic a really good chance at flipping spawns.
There's also another moment that comes through here. Like, here's that play that you're talking about, right? Here's number 8. This is Slack. He's, again, watching boxes at the moment, but not really in a position to see where exactly Hollow is. Your teammates just won the hill. I don't think you need to reinforce. Like,
no.
You need to be sitting here. You also have this investment in the middle of the map, and this is also another one of those mistakes. Remember last time around, we saw Apathy make this long rotation around the back for this pitch. Now he's in the middle of the map, and he's actually going to come outside, realize that I don't need to be here, and then pushes back this way again. This is another too ambitious play. I think that for Seattle, you're right. Like, we just won the hill. That's 3 dead. Like, that's huge. There's only one place they could be with the position that you've got one player mid-map, you've got Apathy bathroom, and you've got 2 in the hill. The only spot the last 2 could potentially be is right here.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. I think this is a mystery, but I also think Apathy, once again, he's, I think, feeling the kill pressure. He's just looking for more kills because he gets a little bit aggressive. Like, watch this hit. Like, the hill's here. Apathy's in a good spot. He's going to essentially try to push through and pinch, and Octane doesn't need the help. Like, he wins the kills, and there's that play where Apathy comes through, he gets a kill, and then immediately comes back around to hit through water, where I think you just need to cut right back through bathroom again. Try to get help through here. Do the same thing to OpTic that they were trying to do to you. But I don't know. It's a small moment. It's such a small moment, but it's a big moment for sure.
Exactly.
Small mistake for a big moment. I guess we'll say that much.
And now it's like Seattle's like, all right, well, we got control of the hill, but
you got to win that
gunfight. Oh, yeah, that's actually wild. Kenny gets revenge from that top dark crate from P2 gunfight.
Yeah, for real.
Gets some back, but and now like this is how you hit the pinch, right? Like this is beautifully done. Like when you see that pinch done, like it's done from bathrooms to just hitting the player behind the box, typically that's hiding out from the players hitting the front of the hill. And now you do grab the scrap time if you're Seattle. You got a short little lead here for yourself, but you're in this situation again where you need to be able to break, and they're taking almost the same approach, Alan, right? Like they're hitting from across the map, spreading themselves pretty thin, trying to win on their gunfights. So it's almost that same situation where that P3 spawn that could come in might just happen again.
Yeah, but they do find the opening kill, so now you actually could flood, but there's that 50-50 spawn again where you've got members from OpTic spawning in both positions. So it really just comes down to who wins the trades. Honestly, I hate to say that it's a forehead statement, but it's just who wins the gunfights wins the hill, because you really aren't dictating what's happening on the spawns at that specific moment. And well, now finally, and this is that finally moment, because eventually this hit from multiple angles, it essentially gets them right here, right? That's the front line where OpTic are essentially having to turtle, and they're just waiting for the spawns to come out, but eventually Seattle wins these trades up top. So now you're getting a 50-50 spawn to where OpTic spawning on one side, Seattle spawning on the other. This is what Parasite was talking about on Gunrunner. He said there is no favored spawns, just a bunch of neutral spawns. And he's absolutely right. Because if you're all spawning up here as a full team, and you're all spawning down here as a full team, that is the definition of neutral. They're literally both 50-50ing to see who gets here first. So,
over toward Cargo.
big play for Hollow. Only finds one, but he gives space. That's the bigger thing. So now the rest of his teammates can get here. And he played a really good game, actually.
Yeah, he had a fantastic game. It felt like, I think a couple of the subs here in this game were just in like some of those takeover moments, which is obviously so influential for both teams, but now you got a close game, right? Like this is another weird spot where it's like, well, whoever controls P2 now has a chance of closing the game out. So it's like we play this like ring around the rosy of, well, whoever set up first is likely the team that ends up closing things out. But that's when some of these crazy things start to happen. Apathy's feeling himself, wins like a crucial gunfight here onto Slasher. Doesn't decide to push it out here and try to play for the spawns, but it's giving room, like you had said in the previous hill, where it's like, okay, we have to find Apathy. Apathy is missing currently, so they have to send the majority of their members through crates to be able to deal with them.
Yeah, that's tough, right? Because every time you have to go searching for a member, that results into some time, like Lando's talking about right now, on the hill itself. And this is actually not a bad spot. Like, so one thing we didn't really mention was the fact that Seattle did decide to keep flooding this for the scrap time, which you don't often see. And I feel like a lot of amateur teams that are out there, or like mid-tier challenger teams, they read the game in one dimension, whereas, oh, there's 15 seconds left on P5. we have to rotate to get to P2. But it all is dependent on what the score is. Like, because they put themselves above 190, and then they just sit there and say, let's play for as much time as possible on P1, you're actually in a position to be above 215, and OpTic can't win the game on the second hard point if you keep them off the first hill. So this is one of those things where Seattle's essentially giving themselves multiple exits to win the game, where they're in a spot where, because of their score, if they can get this to 215, 220 off the first hill, you don't need to full break P2. If you find a little bit of time, that's just cookies in the pocket for you, because you can just luxuriously rotate back to P3 and hopefully secure the game there, because OpTic can't win off P2. So the decide to go for scrap time and the decide to invest to get to P1 time leads to a very interesting moment to where you're giving yourself multiple win conditions where you don't have to do X or Y to win the game. And OpTic with 14 seconds can't go test this. Like, you don't want to give a P2 spawn, so this is a big final 10 seconds.
Yeah, this plays a massive factor for Seattle too, because like best case scenario they find a break and then the pressure's on OpTic, and then that's another spot where you can look to play rotations here. But yeah,
Look at the setup though.
This is like, it feels like it's obviously super tight in the hill, right? Like, you have 3 members that are just playing inside the hill. You have your window position, which is obviously crucial. I think you have Slasher, who's watching the exits from crates from the top window ledge with the AR. So you have pretty much like all the long distance areas covered from left to right. And now I feel like this is the chance for some of your subs to be able to flood out through the middle, like you're seeing, you know, exactly from Hollow right now. Well, one of the ARs, I should say, who's just flooding out through the middle. But this gunfight here for TJ, as he's trying to make sure that no one's rotating through P3, gives them a lot of information on where they're going to be probably hitting from. And likely it's going to be the crates area.
It's one of those things, man. Like, this is, you know, it happened in Black Ops 4 where everyone was so heavily invested in what happens like with KD lines. But it's like, even if TJ doesn't win this gunfight right here, he knows for a fact that Seattle is not spawning here because he just pushed that. Seattle has to be coming this direction. So it gives OpTic a chance to read how they're going to play this. So yeah, you've got a position here that's really nice and forward. It's hard to deal with and likely will get traded. You still have help just in case, and you've still got help just in case. This is actually a really good setup. And it's so different than what Seattle was doing, which was this, right? Like, they were holding themselves in that spot. Look at the difference, man.
Yeah.
Like, that is so much more control of what's happening. It's so much more control. So yeah, TJ loses this gunfight, but now you've got information that they're mid-water. You've got a good amount of help. TJ spawns right back up. He doesn't lose anything by losing that gunfight. He can still help this rotation. And TJ doesn't find another kill, but now Hollow spawns up. It gives you so much awareness. And Slack really needs to win that gunfight. He just needs to chow that.
I think he was trying to. It's just like he pre-fired and he was just like not. I think the player that was disciplined in the corner kind of saved it. And now they have the smoke down. At least they're doing what OpTic did on the second attempt when breaking the hills. They have the smoke down. They're watching the cross, but they have the player in the back here, which is Kenny, and he ends up finding himself a kill to make sure no one slips through. So they shut down this entire push, and now it's Seattle's like, okay, we cannot hit this one more time. We need to set up for the new hill, because now the game is finally going to be won on a particular hill here, likely. So yeah, this is where Seattle are trying to set themselves up in a spot once again. But we've already pointed out, I think some of their P3 setups have been a little bit weak, and OpTic now has had a chance to go through 2 of them where they funneled resources through forest, which once again, when this happens, like if you lose these gunfights, you're probably going to spawn water tower or up by coal, so you can still have a straight shot at the hill and be able to maybe play a numbers advantage here when they funnel too many members over towards the left side, which might be the case based off how Pander was picking things up in P2, how Octane feels the need to play over this head glitch here on P3 to watch over the entire area and watch a bit of that pinch through the middle of the map here. So it's a spot here for OpTic where pretty much their push has to be perfect, in a sense where if you lose 1 or 2 pushes, then the game might just be over.
The other thing too, and this is another one of those moments that I feel like, again, there is some amateur plays that are still happening from players like Pander and Proto. Pander is still trying to clear out boxes. This is a misread. Like, Seattle doesn't realize that OpTic haven't rotated yet. Like, they were fighting for every single second, and instinct is taking over, saying, I need to make sure we've got back spawns. What do you already do? You've got a player mid-map, that's Proto, I think, who's right up front. I can't really tell, the numbers are hard to see. But you've already got a member here. You've got a member here. There's no reason that there should be anybody back this way. I think this is one of those moments that, again, it's just, you're stretching yourself so thin that you're going to have positions to where essentially the last player at the live is going to be Octane if everyone falls in front of you. So you win the gunfight at Cole. You're still helping the back just in case. And this is okay. Like, you turn it into okay situation because you win this gunfight here, you win another gunfight here, to where you're essentially zoning like this. And that's actually really strong. But you're still so individualistic to where people can't help for each other's trades. And you're in the closing moments of a game here. And the other problem, oh, I remember this. Okay, so we watched this happen. So this is the other problem. Slacked actually, I think, comes back to pinch this. And he leaves Octane's flank completely open. Like, Octane now, look what he's looking at. Like, he's trying to watch everything over this way to essentially help Proto, who, look where he's at. He's right behind this box. Like, you can see his name right there. He's hiding behind this box.
Yeah, it's like a moment where it's like, those spawns are probably going to come in through at some point as well. And like, they lose the boiler control here. They have one player that rotates rotates late off of the old hill. So now the spawns end up coming through by P3. They're still battling things out, and then Holo ends up winning the gunfight on a Proto. So now it's like panic mode. It's like, whoa, we lost the middle of the map. We just lost the front. They just broke the hill, and yeah, they just flood on in because of those spawns and because Slack didn't hold that. Like, if we back up a bit, Alan, I feel like there's like a really big moment where, like you touched on, Slack goes to hit it. Now there is an actual avenue where I think Slack has a chance to open up with a potential 2 kills. Now if he were to find both of those 2 kills here, as I'll try and go forward with it, if he's able to find both of those 2 kills, it feels like that's the avenue where, okay, maybe Seattle then can just focus on the front and they know they have forest control. But I think the bigger problem here is that the whole setup is based on Octane holding the line of sight across the entire map, and someone just simply needs to be able to hold boiler or hold this coal area, so Octane has the safety to know, okay, I can just hold this and we're good and our setup's good until gunfights start playing out here for us. But I'm pretty sure once Slack makes the pinch play, he's like, oh, okay, I guess I got time and I'm going to jump in towards the hill, where they no longer have this like insane cross map setup here that's pushing in towards the back to forest.
This is just, I think, a little bit greedy, I think, overall from Slack.
I think it is,
because you're in a position where Proto's not going to find the trade onto Apathy. Slack can't find the trade onto Apathy, and Apathy falls right here. He dies. And that's all that's needed for OpTic. It's so much value off of what should be a minimal kill. Like, you should be able to pick that pinch back up. You should be able to have someone, like, if you're just sitting here as Slacked, and you're watching kind of both, right? Like, you're essentially making sure nobody comes through these areas. But once you realize it's coming to the middle of the map, you just back up and hold boiler. But the problem is he goes for this, and because this kill comes through, OpTic have a free line of sight to get in. And then they flood through both directions because the trades aren't there. I think that if you hold that differently, under 20 points, I mean, here comes that rotation. There's a kill in the Apathy. Here comes TJ. Kenny gets through in the back because Slack is worried about the pinch. He does find 1 kill, but TJ's already gotten boiler. And Slack he actually does find 2 kills, but the problem is they're just not in the right spot. Like, yeah, you find a kill here and you find a kill here, but you're spawning here now. Like, you miss all of this. I think it's just a little bit over aggressive.
I think it is. I mean, it absolutely is. Like because we talked about boiler this entire year of like one of the most important pieces of the map. Like, it really is. Like, I mean, like, if there's one thing you can take away from Gunrunner domination or hardpoint, it's that a lot of certain rotations are based off of this boiler room that plays such an important factor.
Yeah,
and if Slack, I think, backtracks and just holds that for Octane, then he can maybe at least play the heady, right? Like, he can play the heady, or even if Slack sits in the corner, like right outside the boiler door, where you can watch the coal as well as the boiler exit. Like I feel like that's another moment where Octane can post himself up on this green heady and still watch the same line of sight, just from a different position, right? Like,
yeah,
I feel like that could have been like a different avenue if that comes through. But I mean, it's obviously there's a lot of tension. Like, it's the ending game. I mean, like, you don't see that many hills come down to a P3
no,
like in the third rotation.
Really
that just doesn't happen. So I imagine there was probably a lot of adrenaline, a lot of emotion, probably bubbled up with all these players here when they were making some of these calls. But I think that's just a moment where you see your teammate die in the middle of the map, and you have to make that split call, saying, I can no longer make this pinch happen. I have to backtrack because I need to put my resources into the most important part, the objective in the hill.
Yeah, I still think there's something, to be said for, because Slack finds this kill, he's thinking that there's no chance they're spawning up in this position. And he's sitting there thinking that, okay, well, if they're actually spawning back down here, because you got to keep in mind that P2's still active. So the active spawns are either up here
Still playing there.
or up here, right? So I think there is some consideration that because Slack finds this kill, he's thinking that, okay, they're spawning cargo. Let me come help pinch this. But ideally, again, because we are so late in the game, I think that just holding this setup is just better. You're essentially forcing them to make they have to make that rotation. It's the only play they could make. Once you give up this spot, though, here, I know that if Parasite, if you were watching, he would say that you're giving up the ability to block this spawn for P2 or P3. It doesn't matter which hill's active, because this is a spawn for both hills, whether you're on 2 or whether you're on 3. That is still this is why we call this a rotational spawn.
Absolutely,
because it exists for both of the hills. So because he gives up this block, you just get the flood. So I mean, it's one of those moments like I can see what's happening and I totally understand it, but like these are the mistakes that are going to potentially cost teams. Not just Seattle. I'm not just pointing out this from Seattle's POV, but those are the plays that could cost the team a playoff. I mean, for both of these guys, they're in losers round 1. So
yeah, I mean, that's right. Like one team's playing one game at champs and going home. So yeah, it is these little plays. And I mean, a lot of it, I feel like the big takeaway from Seattle was just, I think the wrong times pinching or taking the wrong routes pinching.
I think so too.
Which, right, like that. I mean, like it's hard to say how much of that's been fixed over the course of this last month,
3 weeks.
Yeah, it's you're hoping it's a lot because it's little moments like that that are going to flip out spawns. Little moments like that that are like they're going to play the difference in the final moments of a hard point like this one did. So yeah. Tough one to swallow and watch back, I imagine, for especially the sub players that make those. Are like, damn, if I literally just backtrack here and just go watch Boiler for Octane, like we probably have the numbers to be able to lock things down out front and make sure we don't get full flooded.
Let me see if I can do this real quick as we're running out of time. I'm not going to lie to you guys. That is not at all how we planned on using our hour. We wanted to go through at least 3 maps. We went through 1. So tomorrow we will we will do a little bit better to try to. Oh my God. Yeah, I know, dude. We talk too much. We're just yeah, dude. We just smoked that entire hour. But I just want to pull up really quickly just this Gunrunner just as a kind of a takeaway as far as, you know, what to look for, I think, coming forward here to kind of finish off the rest. So one thing that we noticed a lot of, you know, if Gunrunner does pop up for either of these two teams, we'll see if they've changed, right? Seattle, very passive on their setup for P2's defense, right? That's one thing to kind of see. Are they going to adjust that? You know, when we saw OpTic holding P2, it was something that looked a little bit more like this, right? Where you had someone who's responsible for this direction, someone up close, and then you had 3 on the hill. That was the setup for OpTic. That's, I think, the ideal setup overall, is to run something like this, where Seattle was playing much more passive, where they were essentially holding on top of the hill and on top of AC. So has that changed at all? Are Seattle going to be able to help kind of dictate where OpTic are spawning more regularly? Beyond that, I think you're also looking at to see if Seattle plays this map, are they going to continue to make this strategy happen from 4 to 5, where they're moving across the map like this and hitting from multiple angles? That was my biggest takeaways from Seattle, I think, overall.
Yeah, like you can take 2/3 of the map, right? Like you can take 2/3, but like you can't take all 3. Like I don't know. Like it feels really weird. Like it feels like they want to block like both spawns, but there's no such thing as like a deep spawn out, right? Like you can't like deep spawn people out. Really,
well, I mean, you have like, the ability. Whole, but yeah, like, these are the quote unquote deep spawns, but when you're hitting this, that just results in them pinching you. Like,
well, I mean that, and I mean, like, as soon as like less number, because like it's very unlikely you're just gonna 5 wipe them from making this play. So like as soon as some of the trades play out on one side or the other, like typically the team that's gonna have, you know, fewer numbers on the force side, like you're gonna start spawning force, or vice versa on the coal side, right? So I don't know. It's obviously, you know, it's something that I don't think a lot of teams are obviously doing, because it costs you, especially if you lose. Like if you lose all those gunfights and you go like 4 down, only trading like 1 player, like it puts you in a spot where you might then get one of those deep spawns and you're just fighting from such a tough spot.
Essentially, this is what we saw happen the last time around, where you lose these gunfights. This is your first spawn. You're gonna have like, this is your first, this is your second, but then behind that, this is OpTic's first, this is OpTic's second, and then here's your third, and then here's your fourth, right? Like that's like the worst case scenario as far as how you're kind of pinstriking those spawns. But yeah, that's my biggest takeaway, I think, for Seattle overall. Before we kind of wrap things, is are they going to change this P2 setup And are they going to change their approach from 4 to 5? Do you have any kind of big takeaways from either side, OpTic or Seattle, before we end?
I think like there's like some really good positives for OpTic. I think OpTic, like even though like there's a couple of these misplays that you see, like this is only 2 weeks into like teaming with each other,
Yeah.
and I feel like almost everyone on this team has a really good idea of when to make like the smart plays. Like you saw a couple routes made from TJ, you saw a couple times playing your life in towards the back, like Hollow did on P3 when things were over beside the crates and they flipped things out twice to P5. So I think there's like a lot of discipline for some of these, even these young guns here for the squad that I think have really good awareness. And I mean, I think that's going to be magnified here when we see them play today for sure.
Great. So we'll wrap things here. We're going to have some internal discussions behind the scenes of how we can shorten ourselves up and make sure we don't talk too much and try to actually break down the pivotal moments and not the entire map. But I think that's probably part of the problem because we'd watched this beforehand. Like we were going to set up big moments and then like we realized everything that was happening while we were watching the first time. So
yeah,
we'll try to do more of a raw reaction to set things up for tomorrow. So for all you guys that came in and watched, appreciate it. Make sure you guys follow along with the channel. That's at Visions Casts with 2 Z's. I'm at IHOLDSHIFT on Twitter. Make sure you guys hit us with some follows. Appreciate the love out there and enjoy the playoff games. What do you want to do? We want to do for anyone who's out in chat? Last things. Do you want us to do breakdowns of games from today, or would you rather us do setups for games before they start tomorrow? That's my only big kind of lingering question. Would you prefer us to do, okay, here are some things we saw from a couple of weeks ago for these specific teams that are going to be playing, or would you rather us have a breakdown of other OpTic Gaming stuff, or OpTic Gaming, or LAG, or Paris, or Seattle when they play today? Because those are the only 2 matches that we have. So let us know what you think about that and everything. We can't do everything, Limerick. It's too much. Too much. Let's go. Let's go watch some games. We'll talk to you guys later. We'll see you tomorrow.